Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. Representative Rick Crawford in Arkansas today with plenty of things going on here. Everything from the impeachment hearings all the way down to jobs in Northeast Arkansas. And joining us now on the Capitol View here, Representative Rick Crawford. Representative, we appreciate your time. Let's get into things here. I know the impeachment hearings, the proceedings are kind of a hot topic up there right now. Where are we at in this process overall?
Well, we're kind of lost in a process that is not really much of a process. So there hasn't been a formal impeachment inquiry, certainly nothing introduced on the floor, nothing we could vote on. So what we have is, a continuation of a sham process that's taking place in the basement down there in the very lower levels of the Capitol. Where they're bringing people in, taking depositions. This is not classified. However, it's taking place in the intelligence SCIF, Secure Compartmented Information Facility. And even though this isn't classified, they're closing the session so they can retain the transcript and not make it public, and then selectively leak what they would like the public to know that supports their narrative. So that's where we are in the process. And my feeling is, if you want to impeach the president, I would recommend strongly that you don't. But if you want to do that, if you feel that there is something that has that you're at a certain level where that is warranted, then you should do it in the light of day. I mean, heck, the Washington Post, that's their mantra, their slogan: democracy dies in darkness. So let's take it out of the darkness, put it on the House floor, roll the dice, take your chances. Otherwise, I suggest we get back to the work of the people.
Now, I know a group of House Republicans kind of stormed the proceedings, if you will. It was on Wednesday, kind of delaying the closed-door testimony of top Pentagon officials. House rules only allow members to participate in depositions if they serve on those committee holdings. What did you make of that scene? Was it, I guess, would you say, was that be the right thing to do in terms of the House Republicans, or is this kind of more we're making a bigger scene?
Well, I think using the term stormed the proceeding is probably an overstatement, a little bit of mischaracterization. The fact is there was actually an orderly procession into the SCIF. It was some disagreement about whether or not they should have been present. But I think it gets back to my point about the fact that this proceeding is taking place in a committee that doesn't have the jurisdiction to implement an impeachment inquiry. And so it should be done in the Judiciary Committee, not in the SCIF in the basement of the Capitol. However, members, upon election to Congress, they have conferred upon them a top secret clearance. So they're entitled to certain information. I understand that I serve on the Intelligence Committee, so I have access to information that not every single member has. And just because you have a top secret clearance doesn't necessarily entitle you to every bit of information there is. There is some level of control exercise there. However, we're not talking about classified information. We're talking about depositions that are taking place within a committee that doesn't have the jurisdiction to implement an impeachment. So you can understand there's probably a level of frustration among members that feel like they should be entitled to know what's going on there, because they're being basically denied the ability to get that information and communicate the process to their constituents. And so I think that's where the frustration lies.
Absolutely. Here, let's kind of switch gears here. Several Chinese investments in Arkansas, 3 in your district up there in the northeast part of the state, being supported by Chinese investors. Rise Ever getting ready to open doors to both 120 employees, heavy machinery equipment there in Jonesboro. The company did announce all that last week. Governor Hutchins says this will allow Arkansas to import more from China, kind of balance things out for the good of the United States, but you tend to disagree with that. Is that right?
Well, listen, I think we have some concerns about certainly trade deficit with China. China's a significant market. However, I think we should be very guarded about who we invite with regard to foreign direct investment into our economy. The fact is, China is not investing in Arkansas to empower our economy. They're investing in Arkansas to empower theirs. And so it's not a fair assessment, in my opinion, to say that the Chinese are here in some sort of benign capacity. there's something in it for the Chinese, and they're going to come out on the good end of this deal, or they're going to leave. And they have a history of saying one thing, doing another. That's evidenced by what's taking place in Forest City with the Rui factory, which we don't know what's going on there. The Rice Ever plant, they're promising a lot there. It remains to be seen what will actually happen. But I continue to be guarded about allowing this communist nation to come in and play a role economically in our country. Now, I have some concerns about China that not only are based here in Arkansas, but in our hemisphere, where they're exerting great influence on countries throughout Central and South America, where they're saying, if you'll do X, Y, and Z, what we want is your vote in the UN. If you'll do X, Y, and Z, we'll buy you a soccer stadium, or we'll give you 5G, or we'll do this or that. It starts by expelling Taiwan from their country, and it ends with they get what they want, a vote in the UN. And it's usually against us, the United States. The Chinese have the stated goal of world dominance by 2049. Well, we're almost there. They started this in 70 years ago with the Communist Revolution, and they have stated this over and over again. If you're not familiar with the Belt and Road Initiative or the Made in China 2025 initiative that they're proposing, you should Google that and find out. They're doing this all over the world, not just in the United States. And I just don't think we ought to be welcoming that kind of investment, because it's really not investment. It's certainly not an investment in our economy. So I have some concerns about it, yeah.
So would you be kind of in favor of almost cutting off ties, maybe not complete ties, but and you kind of have that sort of cautious optimism about dealings with China?
Here's what I think we should be doing with China, is recognizing that they are a significant market destination for our goods, that they are demand inelastic. They have to have certain things that we produce, because at certain times of the year, we're the only ones that can meet that demand. And I'm talking primarily about agricultural goods. But everything we do with regard to foreign direct investment in China is weaponized against us. It's weaponized in the form of economics. It's weaponized in the form of political influence. And in some cases, it's weaponized literally in the form of military hardware, as we see them ramping up their military capability to include a naval expeditionary force, a carrier group that should be fielded by 2025. They've never had that capability before. How are they able to do that? They're parlaying foreign direct investment in their economy. They're pirating technology. They're forced technology transfers. And we don't even need to talk about the human rights violations and the outrageous treatment of ethnic minorities, religious minorities in China. This is a country that shares no values with the United States. And I think we can recognize that there is some importance and significance in a market of 1.5 billion people. However, I think we have to question what it is they're trying to accomplish here when they invest in our economy. And if you look at their values and compare them to ours, they don't comport.
It's a fascinating conversation, and we'll have to do more of this as this issue kind of develops here. Representative, we're definitely out of time here, but we certainly appreciate you taking some time to come on Capitol View.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, coming up after a quick break, we'll take a look at the top headlines. You're watching Capitol View Sunday morning.
Hello, I'm Mike Stinnett, owner of Windows & More. Did you know that gutters and gutter protection are crucial to your home's foundation? We can help. To find out more, give us a call today at 501-843-3000. And remember, we give you more for your home improvement dollars.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. You know, fall means tailgating and football in Arkansas, and we love it. Football season reminds us that the next generation is on the way. STEM education, lower taxes, and leaner, smarter government are essential to grow good-paying jobs. Jobs that will let Arkansans raise their families right here at home. Stand with Arkansas Competes and demand world-class education, lower taxes, and leaner, smarter government.
Well, hello again, friends. We're back with another visit with Dr. Keith Curry of Curry Health and Wellness Diagnostic Center. Now, if you suffer from neck or back pain, or if you have neuropathy or sciatica or spinal stenosis, you're going to want to call the number on your screen for a free report on how Dr. Curry may be able to help you. It's a $19.95 value, but Dr. Curry will send you a copy absolutely free. But wait until we visit with one of Dr. Curry's former patients in Dr. Curry's Conway Clinic.
Before Dr. Curry, I was bedridden. I couldn't drive, couldn't cook, couldn't clean, couldn't go to church, couldn't take care of kids, couldn't play with my grandchildren, couldn't go to their ball games or anything, and now I can do everything.
Well, friends, you've just heard another story of a life of pain dramatically changed by Dr. Keith Curry. He'd like to help you, too. Well, now's the time to call to get your report on how you can start feeling better. The report is a $19.95 value, but for you, it's totally free by calling the number on your screen.
You know, at the Nash Law Firm, Bear and I say, if you have $1 and 2 relatives, you need to do some estate planning. But what do we mean by that? Well, come and have a free meal with us and let us explain how you can take care of your family at disability or death. Call us today.
Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. The Trump administration says it plans to start collecting DNA from any migrant crossing the border illegally. The DNA collected would go into a national FBI database currently used to track criminals. The policy wouldn't apply to anyone entering legally or under the age of 14. Already, some lawmakers are pushing back.
Our focus should be on people that are violent, not putting walls up and spending 10 or 20 or 30 billion dollars for walls and who knows how much money for DNA samples.
Mike Howell, an immigration policy attorney with the Heritage Foundation, says the policy is legal and will keep the U.S. citizens safe by identifying immigrants who break the law. Senate Republicans introduced a new bill they say will curb mass shootings. After 2 mass shootings in his home state this summer, Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn introduced the Response Act, a bill he says will prevent other communities from going through similar heartbreak. The bill tackles a list of factors like expanding access to mental health care, cracking down on unlicensed gun dealers, and speeding up the death penalty process for people convicted of mass terrorism crimes.
We propose something we think is reasonable that will save lives.
He seems to be bending over backwards to identify various solutions, none of which has anything to do with how to actually stop mass shootings. You can't address this problem without addressing easy access to guns.
And right now, Cornyn's bill has no Democratic support. Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan has ended his long-shot presidential campaign. Ryan struggled to find a place in the crowded Democratic field and had not qualified for the 2 most recent debates. He focused his candidacy on talking economic issues facing workers of the middle of the country. In a video posted Thursday, Ryan says he'll instead seek re-election to his Youngstown area House seat.
I'm announcing today that I am withdrawing from the presidential campaign. After 7 long months of hard work, I'll be returning home to my family and friends and community in Ohio to run for re-election for my congressional seat.
The 46-year-old Ryan ended the most recent quarter with only $160,000 in cash on hand and also seen several staffers leave the campaign. First Lady Melania Trump met with members of Congress on the impact drug addiction has had on American communities. Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer finds there is still a long way to go on the path to recovery.
First Lady Melania Trump made a solo visit to Capitol Hill on Wednesday for a roundtable with lawmakers and administration officials on the opioid epidemic.
Because of the SUPPORT Act.
It's been 1 year since Congress passed and the president signed into law the SUPPORT Act, the administration's signature drug prevention and treatment law. One of Mrs. Trump's Be Best initiative pillars is combating the opioid crisis.
Obviously, that's something that she's passionate about, not only as the First Lady, but as a mother. And she wants to make sure that we're doing the absolute best that we can to address this issue.
Office of National Drug Control Policy Director Jim Carroll was inside the meeting Wednesday. He says the administration is focused on fighting drug addiction.
We're committing to make sure that we have treatment space and funding available for them. And we have a First Lady that is so dedicated to this issue.
Members of the House and Senate joined the First Lady and Director Carroll on Capitol Hill. All were Republican lawmakers, except for one.
It's a shame that it takes a crisis to bring us together.
West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin was the only Democrat at the table. He says he has a strong relationship with the First Lady and appreciated her efforts in highlighting the issue, one that is especially severe in his state.
There's so many things we need to do. We have thousands of kids who are going to be left behind, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Although a year into the legislation, everyone in the room agreed there is a long way to go before America can declare victory over opioid addiction. Reporting in Washington, I'm Kelly Meyer.
And when we come back, we have a nice treat to go along with your tricks, a special Capitol Boo segment coming up.
When the leaves begin to fall, so do the prices. During the final days of the fall clearance sale at Furniture Row, shop today and save up to 50% on sofas and sectionals, dining sets and tables, bedrooms, and unbeatable deals on mattresses. And best of all, the more you buy, the more you save. Save $100 on every $1,000 you spend store-wide. Plus, 3 years, no interest. Shop the largest selection at the lowest prices guaranteed. But hurry, the fall clearance sale at Furniture Row ends Thursday the 31st.
Come and enjoy a new experience in shopping for your home. At Aladdin Rugs and Home Decor, we have over 5,000 rugs in the latest colors and styles. Bring your pillow shams, and sizes. We will help you select the perfect rug. We're #1 in customer service with 15,000 square feet of rugs, unique home decor, wallpaper, and flooring. Remember, buy today, take it home today, and save. Why wait?
Buying my glasses was so easy. Success Vision has the fastest service in town.
I got 2 pairs of no-line bifocals for only $79.
There's a doctor right next door. I got to choose from hundreds of frames. 2 pair for as low as $39.
Great prices and 1-hour service keep me coming back. Success Vision has it all.
2 pair for $39 in an hour for less. Come see us today, Success Vision Express.
For most of the people that walk in our store, it's been an ongoing, non-stop issue, and they're finally walking into the Good Feet store. Okay, the guy that came into my store last year that has had plantar fasciitis for 30 years. I looked at him, I said, "Are you kidding me? I've been here for 14. Where have you been?" I helped relieve a problem that's plagued him for 30 years. I mean, how do you not go home and talk about that?
See for yourself with the free personalized arch support fitting at the Good Feet store.
We like our heroes to be larger than life, but in the real world, heroes don't hide behind capes or masks, and they change lives not with daring actions, but with small gestures. On our 10th anniversary, we celebrate everyone who has played the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery. You've created nearly $1 billion in scholarships to educate the next generation of Arkansans. So while you didn't set out to be heroic, you certainly achieved it, because when you play, we all win.
From the Eagle's Nest in downtown Little Rock, you're watching Capitol Boo! Political talk focused on Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol Boo. From the Boggy Creek Monsters in Fouke to the Crescent Hotel in Hot Springs to the Gurdon Light in Clark County, Arkansas, no stranger to urban legends and spooky haunts. On this special segment of Capitol View, we learn more about the spooky side of Arkansas politics. Many historical sites, people have ties to ghost stories. Here to share some of those with us are Callie Williams and David Ware from the Capitol, and also the outreach, or the community education outreach manager, all that good stuff. All right, so let's get right into this here. What are some of those scary spots here in Arkansas, especially with that political twist in it?
Well, we definitely have like Mount Holly in Arkansas. Ooh. Here in Little Rock. It is definitely one of the most probably haunted spots, haunted cemeteries in the city. Yeah. Mount Holly was created in the 1840s after the cemetery that they had in downtown was outgrown and the city was kind of growing away from it. Mm-hmm. And so Mount Holly is really the Westminster of Arkansas. So it is where we have several governors buried. Many of the Little Rock mayors are buried. We have several senators buried there as well. And it does have a bit of a spooky history. Oh. And so we have stories that are, about ghostly sounds. There's a story of a horse, the sound of a horse and carriage riding through the middle of the cemetery. We also have neighbors who report that the monuments move at night. Some of them showing up in their neighbor's yard or in their yard, and then they'll come out in the morning and it's gone and it's back in the cemetery. And so we do have some haunted stories around Mount Holly.
Ooh, I'm shook up just thinking about it. How many do we have in there in terms of lawmakers? Just kind of ballpark it.
We have 11 former governors that are in there. We have 4 United States senators. We have 13 Arkansas Supreme Court justices and 21 Little Rock city mayors.
All right, so there you go, guys. If you're in politics here, this is where you're going to end up eventually here. Obviously, the Capitol is one of those things. It looks great on the outside. It looks pristine. It's a beautiful building, but it's got a little bit of a history.
Well, it does, and the history starts with what the ground was originally used for. People remember that the Capitol was built on Penitentiary Hill.
Yeah.
It was where the penitentiary had been sited in the 1830s, so you had several decades of prisoners there. A number of them were buried on the grounds. The graves were removed when Capitol construction began in 1899, 1900.
Right.
However, apparently they missed a few parts, because in 1937, some work was being done to put in a sprinkler system on the front lawn over by the Confederate Women's Memorial.
Right.
And they found a few assorted body parts.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Which prompted former Governor Donaghy, who had been kind of the father of the Capitol over the years, to talk to the press about the blood-soaked ground, and gave all sorts of portentous things. But at any rate, the graves had been removed way out of town to a cemetery, which is the site now of the now demolished parking lot for the old Sears building.
Ah, yeah.
On University.
Right. Now, too, there was, I don't want to say controversy is the right word here, but we've had some weird happenings there. I know there's been some issues with some of the elevators sometimes, and I know a lot of people complain about the elevators up there, and this might be why.
I just talk to the elevators, and they generally take me where I want to go eventually. But, yeah, a number of visitors over the years have sensed that the elevator was going to not do what they wanted it to do. And not just visitors, but also Capitol Police, who were there working when I came to work almost 19 years ago at the Capitol, would say that they seemed to sense something, especially in the south elevator.
Right.
And this is tied to probably my nominee for the most likely spirit to haunt the Capitol, if there is one.
Who we got here?
A fellow named Ira Gurley.
Now, you got a picture of Ira,
Yes,
is that right?
I do. Ira Gurley was a Carroll County school teacher turned politician.
Great hair.
He did a term. Well, yes. Whether I'd have that much. But Gurley had done a term in the State House, 1919, 1920. A few years later, he became the Assistant Secretary of the Game and Fish Commission. And he was an up-and-coming young politician. 1932, he was getting ready to run for Secretary of State. June 17th, 1932, he's up on the 3rd floor of the Capitol. He's getting ready to go into the south elevator. And the elevator stops, opens up. And remember, these weren't the closed cars we have today. This is probably an open car. You had an elevator operator and then some sort of a gate or door that was manually operated.
Right.
And we don't know exactly what happened. The newspaper accounts don't really make a whole lot of sense. But we know that a young woman who worked in the comptroller's office got out of the elevator. Ira Gurley was stepping in, but the elevator operator apparently didn't notice that he was stepping in, and so started the elevator going up. Gurley's head and feet were inside the elevator. His hips and back were outside the elevator. He was crushed in the doorway. Yeah. He was rushed to Baptist Hospital, but he died in the ambulance along the way.
Sure.
June 17th, 1932. He was a well-liked young man, much mourned in his time. His daughter, Helen, was 10 years old. She would go on to be Helen Gurley Brown, the famous editor of Cosmopolitan magazine. And he's buried in Arkansas, I think Green Forest, as is she. You know, If there is a spirit haunting the Capitol, I would say
this is the guy.
Yeah,
absolutely here. And I guess quickly here, we'll kind of wrap things up here. You guys have had some stuff not only throughout the month, but kind of even ending the week here, Halloween, that you guys do out there as well.
Yes, we have a Haunted Arkansas speaking or program at Arkansas Tech on October 28th. We do events throughout the year at cemeteries and doing cemetery preservation workshops. And we also specialize in October with haunted programs, not only for adults, but for school children as well in school. So you can find out all the information about those on our website at arkansaspreservation.com.
Fantastic. Well, guys, we certainly appreciate putting a little charge into the show here. Hopefully you guys watch out for our guy out there at the Capitol when next time you visit here. And also get out to some of those cemetery tours. Those things are pretty neat here. We're back to wrap it up after this. You're watching Capitol View Sunday morning.
Have you ever wanted a brand new camper? Hi, I'm Misty Gibson for John Gibson Auto Sales, and we are an official Gulfstream camper dealer. Whether you have good credit, bad credit, or no credit, we will finance your brand new Gulfstream camper. We also have a large selection of used campers, cars, trucks, SUVs, motorcycles, ATVs, performance trailers, and boats. Check us out online at johngibsonautosales.com, and we will have your purchase ready when you get here.
Gets it back. LSU barely keeps possession. Now Chaney steals it and throws it down on the other end. There's a flash and a steal by Sills. Going to go to the other end and lay it in.
Watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And that'll put a bow on this week's Capitol View. We're back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.